Things are chaotic. In Alice in Wonderland, when Alice goes down the rabbit hole, that's the underworld, right? So now she's gone into the substructure of being. And she meets the Red Queen. And the Red Queen is Mother Nature. And Mother Nature is running around yelling, off with their heads, which is, of course, what Mother Nature does. And she tells Alice, in my kingdom, you have to run as fast as you can just to stay in the same place. And that's exactly right. And that's a description of, in fact, evolutionary biologists and psychologists have picked up on that phrase. They call it the Red Queen problem. And the Red Queen problem is everything's after you all the time and you're not smart enough to do anything about it or enough about it. And so that's a permanent existential problem. So how do you deal with that? You've got a biological structure. So your embodiment is part of the solution to the problem. And then you're enculturated. And because you're enculturated, you're taught a lot of things that you need to know, but mostly what you're taught is how to communicate with other people in an acceptable manner. And then once you can communicate with people in an acceptable manner, then you can outsource your problems constantly, which you're doing constantly. And so we're in this continual dynamic exchange of problem solving. So if you're a socialized person, that's what you get access to. And that's something to know if you're going to have kids. And I mentioned this, I think, in a previous lecture. The purpose of being a parent for very young children is to make your children exceptionally socially desirable by the age of 4. Because if you can do that, they're set. Because everyone wants them around. And as soon as everybody wants them around, they want to play with them, they want to cooperate with them, they want to compete with them. It's like the door's open, and they stay sane because they've got all sorts of people who actually like them that are helping them out. And so that's your goal, is to make them as socially acceptable as you possibly can, as socially desirable as you possibly can. And that doesn't mean you render them obedient without spirit, right? That's a tyrant's mode of enforcing social acceptability. It's like, never do anything wrong. Well, that's not any way to, I mean, that's a good piece of advice, you know, like, but it's missing the other half, which is do a bunch of things that are right so that people are thrilled to have you around and encourage that. That's what you want to do as a parent, as well as inculcating the order. And so, you know, and in this little diagram, I indicated that there's God the Father with the Son behind him, and he's ruling over this walled city. So he's like the meta-spirit of the walled city. It's very, very nice image, brilliant image. So it's the collective spirit of the city. That's another way of thinking about it, or the collective spirit of the city across time, or the collective spirit of the force that built and maintained the city across time. Even better. And that's associated with the sun, because it's associated with enlightenment and illumination and all of those things that we associate with higher consciousness and vision. It's a brilliant image. And then I overlaid this, you know. Now, of course, the patriarchal aspect of existence can become tyrannical. It does that quite regularly. It's one of the existential dangers of human civilization, is that civilization is a medication for chaos, but it can spin out of control in and of itself and become its own sort of problem, which is like a hyper-order problem generally, which then produces a chaos problem. So every solution carries within it certain problems, right? Because no solution is perfect, and so you have to keep things in balance. But it's one of the reasons that I'm really, let's call it, irritated about the postmodernists, because they keep yammering about the patriarchy. And it's very, very annoying because it's self-evident that social structures are tyrannical. It's like, that's not news, folks. That's obvious. But that's not all they are. And it's the reduction of the entire complex solution, let's say, to a unidimensional problem. It's just tyranny. It's like, no, actually, it's not just tyranny. If you spent 6 months somewhere that was just tyranny, you'd know the difference very, very rapidly. And that doesn't mean that everyone doesn't give up a pound or 2 or 10 or 20 of flesh to participate, even in a society that's as free as a Western society is. We all get crushed and molded by the tyrannical force of social convention. But at least in principle, the benefit is worth the cost. And then it's also up to you to make sure that you don't sacrifice more to the group than you should. And you can start to tell if you're sacrificing more to the group than you should because you start to become resentful of other people. That's part of the psychological mechanism that's informing you of that. So it's up to you to fight against the overarching pressure for conformity to retain your individual logos, let's say. But that's sort of your problem. It's like the group wants you to behave. Now, if you could behave and be creatively productive, so much the better, but that's pretty damn rare. So the group generally tends to settle just for behave. And there's a tyrannical element of that, but what the hell's the alternative? It's, our society is based on consensus, and the consensus is based on the sacrifice of a certain sacrifice of individuality, even though individuality is absolutely necessary as a revitalizing force for the society. It's a very tough thing to manage properly. So anyways, you have your physiological structure as your first line of ordering in relationship to chaos, because your body presents you with the world in a certain way. And then the second line of defense is something like the sociological structure that you inhabit. We could call those the competency hierarchies or something like that. And thank God for them, because, maybe you're going to be able to specialize in 1 or 2 things in your life, or 5 things, but there's 300 things you need to know. And if it's just you, you'll be doing your genius level mathematics while your bathtub is leaking all over your bathroom floor, and that's not so good. So you can call a plumber, and hooray for that. So, we tend to cooperate to keep chaos under control, and we tend to cooperate to keep order under control, and that's the political dialogue, right? We maintain the culture to keep chaos under control, and we balance the culture out properly to keep the culture under control.